Good morning, everyone. Hello and welcome to our program, Tea and Learn with SLNC and NCMA, a Women's History Month webinar. This event is hosted by the State Library of North Carolina's Government Heritage Library in partnership with the NCMA Library. To learn more about the State Library of North Carolina and the services we offer, please check out our website. To learn more about the North Carolina Museum of Art, please check out their website. You have the option today to interact with us in the chat, so we encourage that. We also wanted to go over some accessibility features. So to view closed captioning, please use your mouse to hover over the control toolbar on the top or bottom of the screen and click on the closed caption CC button. Second, select either show subtitle or show full transcript options. To make any changes to the caption or accessibility settings, click on the closed caption button and select subtitle settings. A window will open. In the left pane, click on accessibility and make any changes you would like. Today's program will be recorded and made available online via our YouTube channel. If you have any questions during the event, feel free to ask questions in the chat. You can submit questions there. And if we are unable to answer your questions during the presentation, we will answer it during the Q&A session at the end. Additionally, we ask that everyone keep your cameras off and sound on mute during the presentation. Without further ado, please allow us to share a little bit about ourselves in the chat. Today, we will begin talking about some notable North Carolina women artists and community leaders. While we can only highlight a handful of stories in a single event, we highly encourage you to do some deep dives on your own because there are so many extraordinary women that have made and continue to make contributions to North Carolina's history and progress. Victoria will be getting us started today and talking about some notable North Carolina women. But first, I would also like to chat a little bit about some upcoming events we have at the State Library of North Carolina. So we have a show and tell with SLNC and GHL, as well as the NCMA Library, in which we will be celebrating women, North Carolina women. This will be in conversation with some of the incredible women that we will be discussing today. So from March 26th, from 3 to 5 p.m. in Studio 2 at the NCMA, we will be exhibiting a curated display of print and online resources on the topic of notable North Carolinian women. And this event is free and open to the public, so we highly encourage you to stop by and join us. And now I am going to hand it over to Victoria to get us started for today.
Thanks, Taylor. So the first woman I am highlighting today was widely hailed as the First Lady of Public Education in the state of North Carolina, and that woman is Harriet Parrott. Harriet, or Hattie Susan Parrott, was born April 23rd, 1879 in Kinston, North Carolina to Benjamin and Martha Parrott. One of 11 children, Hattie acquired a great desire to become a teacher very early in life. Following grammar school, she studied at the State Normal and Industrial College in Greensboro, now known as UNC Greensboro, and also completed coursework at North Carolina State College, now known as North Carolina State University, as well as the University of Tennessee, Columbia University's Teacher College, and Minnesota and Iowa universities. Hattie served in almost every role possible during her career as an educator. She was a teacher, principal, assistant county superintendent, county supervisor, and a visiting instructor at higher institutions in North Carolina and along the East Coast. And through her work with the state, Hattie served both city and rural schools in every county in North Carolina. In 1916, she was appointed by the governor to serve for 5 years on the State Textbook Commission, making her the first woman to take the oath of office to serve on an educational commission in North Carolina. In 1917, she was appointed to the North Carolina State Board of Examiners and Institute Conductors, making her the first vice chairman of that board, and also beginning her 31-year career under the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. In 1921, she stepped into the role of supervisor in the Division of Teacher Training, and by 1928, Hattie served as the supervisor for elementary education and continued in that role until her retirement in 1948. During her career, Hattie encouraged and directed the work of improving elementary education and the opportunities offered to the children of the state. This work included curriculum development, better teaching equipment, use of scientific measurements for grading and classifying students in elementary grades, and compiled suggested lists of professional publications and plans for promoting teacher growth and progress, among many other things. One of my favorite projects directed by Hattie and her department that I came across in my research was the Educational Clinic. The purpose of the Educational Clinic was twofold. First, to provide a child entering school for the first time an introduction to the classroom setting, so that they could meet their teachers and to provide a better understanding of the general classroom regime so that there was less of a mental and physical strain in their first year of school. And second, to provide the teacher and the parent an accurate grasp of the child's mental, physical, emotional, and social state. During the clinic, parents were instructed on such things as proper nutrition and clothing, as well as summer vacation activities that would prepare their child before the school year began. The child also received vaccinations if requested. If you are interested in learning more about Hattie and work she completed as supervisor, check out the 1931 publication Busy North Carolina Women, available online in the North Carolina Digital Collections. This publication features Hattie as well as other busy women of her time. A link to the publication is in the chat. Hattie was a member of various organizations at state and national level. She was a past state president of the Delta Kappa Gamma Society, past state president of the State Primary Teachers Association, charter member and past president of the State Legislative Council, and participated in several state and national conferences related to education, just to name a few. Following retirement from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, she served as advisor to the North Carolina chapter of the Association for Childhood Education as a member of the UNESCO Committee of the International Association for Childhood Education. Numerous publications bear Hattie's name, including countless North Carolina Department of Public Instruction publications published between 1920 and 1950. Several of her works can be found in the State Library's current collection and or available online through the North Carolina Digital Collections. Links to some of these resources are available in the chat. In June 1956, she was the first woman to be awarded an honorary degree of Doctor of Laws from Atlantic Christian College, now known as Barton College. Hattie passed away in Raleigh on March 1st, 1957. In 1961, the North Carolina General Assembly passed a joint resolution honoring the memory of Miss Hattie Susan Parrott, naming her, and I quote, one of North Carolina's greatest leaders in the advancement of public education in this state. Next slide. So the next woman that I'm going to highlight was not known just for her life of service to the state of North Carolina, but to the greater United States as a champion of equality and women's rights. And like Hattie, this woman was not only an educator, but is also recognized for many firsts. That woman is Elizabeth Duncan Kuntz. Elizabeth Duncan Kuntz was born on June 3rd, 1919 in Salisbury, North Carolina to Samuel and Lena Duncan. The youngest of 7 children, Elizabeth was born into a family of educators. Her father was a high school principal and later taught at and served as president of Livingstone College, and her mother was an elementary school teacher. So naturally, Elizabeth was drawn to a career in education. Following grammar school, Elizabeth attended Livingstone College in Salisbury, North Carolina, where she earned her bachelor's in secondary school English and mathematics in elementary education. She went on to earn a master's degree from Atlanta University and furthered her studies in special education at Columbia University, Indiana University, and North Carolina College, now known as North Carolina Central University. Elizabeth taught in North Carolina public schools from 1938 to 1968. Her career began as an elementary teacher in Dunn, North Carolina. In 1955, she entered the state's Developing Special Education Program and taught at Price Junior High School in Salisbury. As a teacher, Elizabeth was known for her kindness and love. At the Elizabeth Duncan Kuntz Elementary School dedication ceremony in 2006, one former student shared that she was placed in the special education classroom, quote, due to assessments and evaluations of teachers who thought she was slow. They told her she was just too dumb to learn anything. Elizabeth, however, saw a young child who wanted to learn and took the time to consider family situations when making her assessments. That former student went on to earn both her bachelor's and her master's and became an educator herself. Elizabeth's public education interests extended beyond the classroom. In 1952, she became active in the National Education Association, or NEA. She held the roles of secretary and vice president before being elected as president of the NEA's Department of Classroom Teachers in 1964. Shortly after stepping into that role, she was the only woman member of a 16-member United States delegation that held a series of public and private talks in Russia. 4 years later, in July 1968, she was elected the first Black president of the National Education Association. During her presidency, Elizabeth advocated for teachers to work together to fully integrate schools, keep curriculum up to date, and to push for fair teaching salaries and pensions. If you are interested in learning more about Elizabeth taking on the role of NEA's Department of Classroom Teachers in 1964, you can read more about it in the November 1964 issue of the North Carolina Public School Bulletin, available in the North Carolina Digital Collections. A link to the resource was shared in the chat. Elizabeth continued her work at the national level when in January 1969 became the first Black director of the U.S. Department of Labor Women's Bureau, appointed by President Nixon. She was a U.S. delegate to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women and served on the U.S. Department of State Selection Board for Performance Evaluation of Foreign Service Officers. Along with advocating for teachers and education, she fought for the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment to the United States Constitution. In 1975, Elizabeth joined the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction as an assistant state school superintendent. She was appointed to the North Carolina Council on the Status of Women in 1977 and stayed on the council until 1981 when she was appointed co-chairwoman of the North Carolina Commission of the Future of North Carolina. Elizabeth retired from the state in 1982. She held many honorary degrees and awards. In October 1976, she received the Medal for Distinguished Service to Education by the College Entrance Examination Board. In 1977, she received the North Carolina Award for Public Service for her national leadership in the field of education and women's affairs. You can read the official awards biography printed in the 1977 volume of the North Carolina Awards publication, available in the North Carolina Digital Collections. A link to the resource was shared in the chat. She also received the North Carolina Distinguished Women's Award in 1985. Elizabeth passed away on January 6, 1989 in Salisbury, North Carolina. In July 1989, just a few months later, the North Carolina General Assembly passed a joint resolution honoring the life and memory of Dr. Elizabeth Duncan Coons. And now I will pass the mic to Taylor.
Thank you, Victoria. So first today, I'm going to talk about Nancy Ward. So Nancy Ward, also known as Nanyahi, was a Cherokee woman born around 1738 in Chota, a village on the Little Tennessee River, which at the time was a part of North Carolina, although it is no longer. She was a member of the influential Wolf Clan within the Cherokee Nation, and she served many important roles in her community throughout her life. Nanyahi, whose name translates roughly to one who goes about, married King Fisher, a member of the Deer Clan, in her early teens and had 2 children with him. Her life took a very dramatic turn, however, during the Battle of Tillawa during 1755 against the Creeks. When her husband, King Fisher, was killed, 17-year-old Nanyahi took up the rifle and led the Cherokee people to victory. This act of bravery earned her the title of War Woman, which is a rare and extremely respected position within Cherokee society. As a beloved woman and a war woman within her community, Nanyahi gained significant influence within her community. She could speak and vote in the Council of Chiefs, which meant she had a voice in making decisions regarding tribal governance. She led the Women's Council. The Women's Council, under her leadership, had the authority to override the chief's decisions, which at the time was very significant. She participated in tribal ceremonies while maintaining cultural customs and traditions for her people. Additionally, as a beloved woman or a war woman, she did have the power to spare the lives of captives or imprisoned people. In one case, a very interesting story, she had pardoned Lydia Bean, a white settler, nursing Lydia back to health and learning new skills from her while establishing relationships with the white settlers in the area. In the late 1750s, Nanyahi married Bryant Ward, an English trader, and officially adopted the name Nancy Ward. This union produced a daughter, Elizabeth, and supported the Cherokees' efforts to create ties with white settlers. Although Bryant Ward eventually returned to his white family in South Carolina, Nancy did maintain contact with Bryant throughout her life. Throughout the years, Nancy Ward became known for her efforts to maintain peace between the Cherokee and white settlers. She warned white settlers of impending Cherokee attacks, notably in 1776. She participated in numerous peace talks between the Cherokee people and white settlers, including treaties at Long Island of Holston in 1781 and Hopewell, South Carolina in 1785. At these peace talks, she advocated for coexistence, famously stating, "Let your women's sons be ours, our sons be yours." As Cherokee society changed, Nancy's legacy endured. In her later years, she moved to Okauchee River Valley on land that belonged to the Cherokee people in what is now eastern Tennessee, and she opened up an inn on the river that she operated for the rest of her life. She continued to advocate for her people, arguing against further land cessions to white settlers, and she passed away around 1822 to 1823 at the age of 85 years old. Nancy's life spanned a period of significant change for the Cherokee Nation. She adapted to many circumstances while striving to preserve Cherokee traditions and land. Her efforts to bridge culture and promote peace earned her the nickname the Pocahontas of the West, though some scholars today argue that this romanticized view oversimplifies her complex role in history. There are very little records that exist today that document the history of Nancy and her life. There is a lack of written Cherokee records written and recorded at that time in general. So information about Nancy has primarily been communicated and relayed through stories about her that were passed on over time and through secondary sources, including NC Women Making History and a Tar Heel Jr. historian article that we will share with you from 1994. And the link to these resources will be posted in the chat. An interesting side story about Nancy that I found while I was conducting research on her later life and legacy is that there was a statue that was erected of Nancy Ward in a cemetery in northern Tennessee. Unfortunately, that statue had been stolen from its resting place and was later discovered in New York City. And had been passed around through quite a few antique dealers. And the state of Tennessee has since been trying to restore the statue to its original resting place in northern Tennessee. So on the left-hand side there, you will see really the only image we have of Nancy as depicted in this statue in northern Tennessee at the time. Next, I will be talking about Ella Mae Wiggins, who was born in 1900 near Sevierville, Tennessee. Sadly, Ella Mae's early life was marked by extreme hardship. She lost both her parents at an early age, by the age of 19, actually, and soon found herself married with a child of her own. Around this time, a textile mill recruiter spoke to Ella Mae and implied that working in a mill in the South could change her family's life. So, lured by the promise of a better life, Ella Mae and her family moved to the textile mill towns of the Carolinas. Ella originally moved to North Carolina between the years of 1925 and 1927. Again, unfortunately, by 1926, her husband had abandoned her after she had given birth to their eighth child. She worked at this time as a spinner at American Mill Number 2 in Gaston County, North Carolina, which was known for having the lowest wages in the area. Her experience in the textile industry was incredibly difficult. She worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. Her weekly wage was just $9, which is the equivalent to about $164 in 2025. And with this, she really struggled to support her growing family, eventually having around 9 children. Tragically, 4 of LMA's children died from whooping cough, a loss that deeply affected her and did fuel her later efforts in activism. In 1929, LMA became involved with the National Textile Workers Union during the Luray Mill strike in Gastonia, North Carolina. As a union organizer, she eventually became a bookkeeper for the union. She traveled to Washington, D.C. to testify about poor labor conditions in the South. And she spoke and sang at union rallies using her own life experiences to inspire others. During the Luray Mill strike itself, LMA sought cooperation between Black and white workers. Independently, she also organized a group of Black workers, friends, and neighbors who lived near her in Stumptown, which was a small community outside of Bessemer City, and brought them into the National Textile Workers Union. One of LMA's most famous contributions to the labor movement was her song Mill Mother's Lament. This ballad highlighted the struggles of working mothers in the textile industry. Her lyrics deeply resonated with fellow workers, with lyrics like, "How it grieves the heart of a mother, you everyone must know, but we can't buy for our children, our wages are too low." What set LMA apart from others was her commitment to racial unity in the labor movement in the 1920s. She organized Black workers to advocate for better working conditions in the textile industry, and her efforts to integrate Gaston County branch of the National Textile Workers Union was groundbreaking for the time. On September 14th, 1929, while traveling to a union meeting, LMA was killed by an armed mob. At the time, she was also pregnant. Her murder shocked the nation and brought attention to the struggle of textile workers. Her accused killers were quickly acquitted after less than 30 minutes of deliberation in the trial, despite the fact that the crime was committed in daylight and more than 50 people had witnessed it. In the aftermath of LMA's death, mill owners reduced working hours to 55 hours per week. Conditions in the mills improved, and welfare work in textile villages was extended. Today, Ella Mae Wiggins is remembered as one of North Carolina's most famous folk heroines, a pioneer in workers' rights, and an early advocate for both women's rights and civil rights. And now I will hand it over to Andrew, the head librarian at the NCMA Library.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. And thank you, Victoria, too. Thank you to both of you for inviting me to this webinar. So I'm going to get started by talking about Catherine Pendleton Arrington, who is known as North Carolina's Lady of the Arts. She was born on April 13th, 1876 in Warrenton, North Carolina. Little is known about her childhood, but we do know that she grew up in a stimulating household. Her father was a lawyer and businessman, while her mother was an intelligent woman who wrote poems, travel notes, and memoirs prolifically. Early accounts suggest that Arrington inherited her perfectionist tendencies from her mother. More archival documentation, including Arrington's genealogical papers, can be found in UNC Chapel Hill's Southern Historical Collection, and you can find a link to the finding aid in the chat. So after graduating from Hollins College in Virginia, she married Peter Arrington, who became a director in export and manufacturing for the British American Tobacco Company. This work brought Catherine to Europe and the Far East, where she developed an interest in Chinese furniture and porcelain. After her father's death in 1916, Arrington returned to North Carolina and volunteered for the Red Cross, the Colonial Dames of America, which is a group known for their efforts in historic preservation, and several other organizations, far too many to list. Her extensive public service and enthusiasm attracted Robert Burton House, who was then chancellor of the UNC Chapel Hill Literary and Historical Association, which was inaugurated in 1900. This connection led to her being elected president of the North Carolina Art Society in 1926, when their first formal meeting took place, and she held that title until her death in 1955. Through her work with the North Carolina Art Society, she was instrumental in the founding of the North Carolina Museum of Art, with an early $1,000 contribution for acquiring art and the donation of the Art Society's first painting, called Mammy by American painter Gary Melchers in 1926. I'm going to include a link to NCMA's newly launched collections page, which provides additional information about NCMA's permanent collection, which is also known as the People's Collection. This new resource highlights artwork's provenance, published references, and exhibition history. Arrington continued to bring art to North Carolina through her various connections in New York City. Despite the lack of a formal art museum at the time, NCMA wouldn't open its first location in the renovated State Highway Division building on Morgan Street until April 1956. Arrington still had a hand in organizing painting exhibitions at Meredith College and the Sir Walter Hotel. By 1929, the state oversaw the Art Society and provided a gallery in the state agricultural building. Throughout the years, she also provided funding for lectures, demonstrations, scholarships, lantern slides for lectures, and art tours. She was awarded an honorary degree from what was then known as the Greater University of North Carolina in 1946. And in the last decades of her life, she was committed to expanding art education in the classroom. Arrington continues to be known as an arts icon in North Carolina and is arguably the most important figure in the creation of today's NCMA. According to the late William T. Polk, former North Carolina state senator and mayor of Warrenton, the people of North Carolina can never repay her for what she has done. This Sahara of art, which North Carolina was 30 years ago, is now blossoming like a rose. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to show a couple of images. Once the slide, oh, perfect. So on the left, you'll see a photo of NCMA's first gifted work of art that I mentioned earlier, donated by Arrington. And I've also included a photo of Arrington surrounded by some of her New York City art world colleagues who she cultivated and brought to North Carolina every chance she had. More information is available in the book A Biographical Sketch of Catherine Clark Pendleton Arrington, which is available at several North Carolina libraries, as well as a vertical file that can be found at the Government and Heritage Library. And you can find links to those records in the chat. So now I'm going to talk about a lot of artists, which is my favorite part because these are some of my actual favorite artists. So it's difficult to choose which ones to highlight, but I think I would be remiss to not include Annie Albers in this next slide, despite her not being a North Carolina native. So born Anneliese Fleischmann in Berlin, Germany in 1899, Annie Albers is one of the most important figures from Black Mountain College, a liberal arts college located in Black Mountain, North Carolina from 1933 to 1957. Annie got her start at the Bauhaus in Weimar, a school known for their architecture and fine arts programs. Helmed by architect and industrial designer Walter Gropius, Bauhaus was revolutionary in spearheading modernist sentiments and aesthetics in the early 20th century, including the promotion of collaborations between fine and applied art. Though Annie was originally rejected from the school, she eventually enrolled from 1922 to 1929. But after the Bauhaus was closed by the Nazis in 1933, she relocated to the US, where she taught at Black Mountain College with her husband, Joseph Albers, from 1933 to 1949. Black Mountain was a progressive school that championed experimental pedagogy and communal farm living. Courses ranged widely from painting to advertising art, color theory to woodworking, and a number of music programs and other special programs that were hosted throughout summer sessions. Albers was a pioneer in the school's interdisciplinary textile design and hand weaving courses. So starting with just one weaving loom, Albers began teaching her classes only months after arriving in the US in 1933. By 1935, she officially became a member of the faculty. Influenced by rapid industrialization, Albers sought to combine principles of art, craft, and design in her curriculum to keep her medium relevant. Her students made utilitarian objects such as placemats, large functional designs for industrial objects, and original artworks that were meant to be hung on walls. She taught advanced students complex structures such as double weaves, corded and honeycomb weaves, and knots that are used in pile rugs, just to name a few. Albers was also keen on material studies, teaching students about particular fiber and thread characteristics such as rayon, cotton wool, boucle, and even cellophane, and much, much more. Faculty on the campus were also known to use natural detritus that they found on the campus as well. So this special attention to textiles helped elevate the material status to the same level as the fine arts like painting and sculpture. It's also no coincidence that weaving and fiber arts have been historically marginalized as domestic or women's work. Albers was really instrumental in shattering that stereotype, and she is now being recognized for her accomplishments separate from her husband. The Black Mountain College Museum and Art Center in Asheville hosted the exhibition called Weaving at Black Mountain College from September 2023 to January 2024, which featured numerous works by Albers and her students. The exhibition catalog is available to read at NCMA's library, as well as several other NC libraries, and you can find that catalog record in the chat. So there isn't time to discuss all the accomplishments of the women at Black Mountain, but I wanted to highlight 3 artists with working with different materials in this next slide. So Ruth Asawa is a mixed media artist, most well known for her hanging metal wire sculpture. She attended Black Mountain in the 1940s and 1950s. She's personally one of my favorite artists. And she was perhaps inspired by a collection of mostly Mexican and South American textile works assembled by Albers. Annie and Joseph both had a pretty massive collection that can now be found at the Yale Art Gallery. NCMA recently acquired 2 works on paper by Asawa, which I'll have linked in the chat. Elaine de Kooning was an abstract expressionist painter who spent a summer at Black Mountain in 1948. She would go on to be one of the most recognizable abstract painters and influential figures in the New York City art scene. And she was included in the famous 9th Street Art Exhibition, where the term abstract expressionism was formally debuted in 1951, along a roster including other influential mid-century women artists, including Joan Mitchell, Helen Frankenthaler, Lee Krasner, and Grace Hartigan. And just an interesting connection, NCMA will be hosting a major solo exhibition of Grace Hartigan's work next month called The Gift of Attention. And some more information about that exhibition is linked below. So that exhibition won't include any works by Elaine de Kooning, but still a really nice, fresh connection to abstract expressionism and the women that were so instrumental in that movement. And finally, I also just wanted to quickly highlight Karen Carnes, a ceramicist who was an artist in residence at Black Mountain. She was much more private, but she did teach private lessons out of her studio. And then she later also taught at the Haystack School and at Penland. Black Mountain's influence overall really cannot be overstated within North Carolina, but also its global influence on avant-garde art of the 20th century. And there's enough material for a full seminar, but I will stop there in terms of Black Mountain College. And next I will talk about Maud Gatewood. Okay, so in addition to Maud Gatewood, I'm going to chat a little bit more about some other artists, but it's going to be a little bit rapid fire, I think, because I could just ramble on forever. So these artists that I'm going to talk about have really come to define the modern and contemporary arts in North Carolina. Maud Gatewood was born in 1934 in Yanceyville, North Carolina. She is one of the most distinguished painters in our state, having received the North Carolina Award for Fine Arts, which is the highest civilian honor in our state, and that was in 1984. Gatewood taught at both UNC Charlotte and Everett University, as well as served on the North Carolina Arts Council's Board of Directors and the Caswell County Board of Commissioners. She also won the North Carolina Arts Council Artist Fellowship in 1980, as well as the prestigious NEA and SICA Fellowship the following year. And these are just a few of her accomplishments. She had a very long and well-established career. Though many know her as a portraitist, some of her most intriguing works are landscapes, which were her primary focus in the 1970s. And you can see some examples in this next slide. She established a unique style by the 1960s, which was defined by subtle palettes and a lack of embellishment. So you can see here, there are soft colors, lots of pale pastel colors. When human figures do appear in her works, they're usually hinted at or they blend into their surroundings rather than taking center stage. Gatewood really prefers not to explain her works, which helps lend an air of mystery, pretty appropriate considering her ambiguous and still compositions. NCMA owns 18 of her paintings, and the Blowing Rock Art and History Museum recently hosted a major Gatewood retrospective called The Hard Edge and the Soft Line. And just a quick tidbit at our library, Gatewood is one of the most heavily researched artists we find from the public. So maybe not so surprising that she's made it onto this presentation. Okay, the next slide. One of my personal favorites is Beverly McIver, who in recent years had solo exhibitions at NCMA Winston-Salem, formerly SICA, and the Contemporary Art Museum in Raleigh. Born in 1962 in Greensboro, McIver has become a monumental figure in portraiture, having been listed in Art in America's Top 10 in Painting list in 2011. She currently teaches as a professor of practice at Duke University. In this next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about some of her paintings. McIver's paintings have a lush and gestural quality. She's primarily interested in self-portraits and portraits of loved ones, especially her mother and her mentally disabled sister Renee, who McIver promised to take care of after her mother's passing. These deeply personal experiences were documented in the 2011 documentary, Raising Renee. In some of McIver's self-portraits, she includes diaristic texts that provide an intimate glimpse into her life. In the bottom image, you can see some of these works in the background, installed in the Full Circle solo exhibition that traveled from the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art in Arizona to NCMA Winston-Salem. So that's kind of hovering in the back. There's 3 paintings that you can see. And they're self-portraits essentially with a band of text above that are basically read like diary entries. In other paintings, she depicts herself in clown makeup, a wig, or in blackface, exploring challenging notions of performativity, blackness, and racial stereotypes. We see this in her 3-panel painting called Reminiscing, one of 2 of her works at North Carolina Museum of Art. And just as a personal anecdote, despite the many hardships she's experienced, she remains a humble and warm artist. I was fortunate enough to see her speak at NCMA Winston-Salem's solo exhibition, Full Circle, and was really shocked by how personable she was. And we have the full catalog that you can view at our library at NCMA, and that link to that record will be in the chat. And last but not least, in this final section, Elizabeth Matheson is perhaps the photography equivalent of Maud Gatewood in terms of her notoriety as a North Carolina artist. Recently, I was talking to a private collector who referred to her as like the photography grande dame of North Carolina. So born in 1942 in Hillsborough, Matheson has had a tremendous career. After earning her BA at Sweetbriar College, she studied at Penland School of Crafts under the photographer John Menapace, with whom she developed a fortuitous lifelong friendship. Like Menapace, Matheson revered the history of photography and drew inspiration from an eclectic group of photographers, including Eugene Atchett, Robert Adams, and Walker Evans, among many, many others. And in 2004, Matheson was also awarded the North Carolina Award in Fine Arts. Next slide, please. Matheson's photographs are typically black and white, like you can see on the left, though she has a small body of digital color works, as you can see on the right. Her work is typically characterized by a quiet sense of timelessness. Many of the settings Matheson captures appear ambiguous, though they are filled with a narrative quality. Pinecrest on the right, for instance, depicts the swimming pool from the former home of philanthropist Mary Duke Biddle in Durham. The fiberglass shell covering the pool, which you can see over above, it's hard to tell what it is, but that's a covering for the pool that can be opened during warmer months. So it's easy to imagine the changing seasons and the lavish parties at this estate. Curators of one of her solo exhibitions called Unseen at Castle House, which is a private collection and exhibition space as well as a domestic space. So the curators of this exhibition called Unseen, Lori Verba and Kent Corley, note that Elizabeth Matheson's photography is a rare invitation, indeed, one that comes from a time and place that is kinder, gentler, and more refined than the world most of us inhabit. And I think I would agree with that quote. Pinecrest will also be featured in the exhibition Then and There, Here and Now, Contemporary Visions of North Carolina at NCMA in the fall. So again, this is just a quick crash course of women in North Carolina arts. I could go on forever, but as was explained earlier, there will be some resources to take a look at NCMA in a couple of weeks. So I hope you can join us for that.
Thank you, Andrew. So now I'm going to open it up to questions. If you have any questions for Victoria, Andrew, or I, please pop them into the chat now. To get us started, however, I do have a question for you, Andrew. I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit more about the operations of the library and how one can conduct research in the space itself.
That is a great question because most people don't know the art museum has a library. And I think that's for a good reason. We're located on a higher floor in the museum where that's mostly occupied by staff offices. So it's not something that you can just casually wander into usually. But we are open to the public Wednesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So there's only 2 full-time staff there, myself and our lovely library assistant, April. We just ask that you schedule an appointment to come see us, and it's usually pretty easy. Let me just drop our email into the chat here in case you're interested. We have a collection of about 40,000 volumes, 2,000 of which are considered rare and stored in a different part of the building. We mostly focus on collecting materials that are connected to the People's Collection. So if you go onto NCMA's website and look through the art there, the departments, that kind of mirrors what we have in the library as well. So we have collecting strengths in North Carolina arts, contemporary art, Judaica, European, American, and a pretty good collection of works related to ancient art too, including classical antiquity and ancient Egypt. So yeah, you're welcome to email us to schedule an appointment, or if you ever have any reference questions about anything art related, we're happy to help.
Thanks, Andrew. And I can just chime in to mention, if you're interested in conducting research in the State Library Government Heritage Library space, our reading room is open for researchers from 9 to 5 on Tuesdays through Fridays. And we are also open on Saturdays, 9 to 1 p.m. And parking is usually a breeze on Saturday if you want to come on a Saturday to get some research done. We also have a question regarding Nancy Ward. While I was doing research on Nancy's Ward statue, I did not really get a conclusive answer on where her statue is now. In 2006 was the first time that it was rediscovered after it had been stolen around the 70s or 1970s, 1980s. And 2006 is when it was located at an antique dealer's possession in the state of New York. However, there are some members of there are some Tennesseans who are very passionate about recovering this statue and have been tracing where it has been since it was stolen, because there is evidence that it has switched hands multiple times since being rediscovered in 2006 in the state of New York. So the mystery of Nancy Ward's statue still continues to this day, and hopefully one day it can be returned to its rightful place. Thank you for that question. Okay, let's see. We have another question I'm going to pop here in the chat. And this is open to all three of us if you want to answer. Why did you choose to talk about the history of these women and what interests you about their stories? I can go first with the two women that I chose, LMA Wiggins and Nancy Ward. I was really drawn to their stories because they had an incredibly difficult life, both of them, in really interesting and unique ways. And I think what really drew me to their stories is their resiliency in the face of hardship. So, in the case of Nancy Ward, really taking a leadership role in her community, regardless of all of the issues that the Cherokee people were facing due to white settlers moving into their area and their loss of land as a result. And in the case of LMA Wiggins, I was really inspired by, her ability to pick up her whole family and move and start over in the mills of North Carolina with her children, especially after her husband left her and she was working as a single mom for many years, struggling to make ends meet for her children. So I think their resiliency in the face of such hardship was really inspiring, and I was happy to share a little bit of those histories with you all today. Andrew, Victoria, you want to share?
So this month is Women's History Month, right? So happy Women's History Month, everybody. And this year's theme from the National Women's History Alliance is Moving Forward Together, Women Educating and Inspiring Generations. So I knew I wanted to highlight some sort of educator because we need to highlight our educators, right? Whether you had a positive or maybe not so positive experience, I'm sure everybody has a teacher that they can remember at some point in their life. I had a kindergarten teacher, Miss Spangles, that she was just so kind and sweet and was patient. Uh, you know, Middle school teachers who inspired me to just enjoy my passion for history. And so I knew I wanted to highlight educators. So in my research, um, I came across Hattie, who she um, was a very uh, I, mm, not so much. I mean, trailblazer. Like to say trailblazers. She never married. She was taking on all these first roles. She wanted to make a difference in a child's life. So I knew I really wanted to highlight or at least share her story with you all. And same goes for Elizabeth. She was just the the things she took on. Um, you know, Stepping into the role as president of the National Education Association during school integration and as the first Black president of that association. And just the story I shared about during the elementary school dedication for with her name on it, that a former student came and said that she took the time to actually know me and to see that I am capable of things that maybe others did not see in me. And so I knew that was definitely someone else I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, and I had to talk about Catherine Pendleton Arrington. I don't think I can talk about North Carolina arts without mentioning her. And she really is the reason that NCMA exists today. Her name is still in a lot of our book plates. There are endowments named after her. Again, you just can't talk about arts without mentioning her. And then Annie Albers, I just love her as an artist. I focused on researching Josef Albers in grad school and curated a special exhibition really focusing on Albers at Yale. But of course, thinking about his past and his connections, I started to really untangle how much focus was on Josef. And in doing this research, encountered Annie Albers' work and was really blown away. And I'm glad that she's finally getting more recognition that's separate from Josef today, including that special exhibition at Black Mountain College. And the other Black Mountain College women just love their work personally. Maud Gatewood and Elizabeth Matheson, again, are like regularly mentioned at the museum. And then Beverly McIver, she's had so much recent success with her solo exhibitions, and her painting is incredible and really challenging. Every time I see her work with different people, there's different reactions. Some people are really sort of have an aversion to her work because, especially when she incorporates blackface or clown makeup, but it's this really like challenging reflection on how she sees her own personal identity and how much performativity is involved in that. So just really powerful artists in general.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew and Victoria. We had a couple other questions popped in the chat. So I do not know for sure if Nancy Ward has surviving family in North Carolina or Tennessee or elsewhere. However, that seems like a great question to answer using DHL resources. So one of the things that was popped in the chat previously is we do have in our print collections, or sorry, our digital collections, Ward family history records of the Eastern Cherokee tribe. And these are records that were copied over from the National Archives in Washington, D.C. So if you are interested in researching the Ward family line more, you can do so using that resource, as well as several other we have in our collection that document the history of Eastern Cherokee tribes. And then the second question was, did Nancy Ward have a role in the Revolutionary War? And the answer is yes, a pretty significant role. So unfortunately, Virginia and Tennessee militiamen did attack and destroy several Cherokee towns during the Revolutionary War. And so Nancy was quite involved in peace talks between the militiamen of the time in those two states and the Cherokee people to protect their lands from further destruction. And to ensure that these lands would no longer continue to be taken and destroyed at the hands of the revolutionaries. And so as a diplomat and a leader in her community, she really was a steward for making sure that their lands were protected and preserved during the war. And she played a key role in that within the community. Alrighty, well, thank you all for joining us today. We have gone through some great questions. Thank you all for asking those lovely questions. We have now the opportunity for you to submit some feedback. So to all of our viewers today, your feedback is very important to us. Please take a few minutes to complete our survey that you can access using this slnc.info link. We want to hear what you have to say, and we really use this participant feedback to inform our future events. Thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you next time.